being at camp that first summer that I was at was the best possible thing that probably happened to me in my life.
Hello and welcome to Kept in Her Heart, where we talk about all things faith-related. I'm your host, Jenny Fuchs. Today, Evie, my daughter, joins us to tell us her faith story.
It all started when I was born. You were there.
I was. It was a great time.
I was raised Catholic my whole life. So I grew up going to church, just learning about the faith from a very young age. And I was homeschooled, so that was always part of our curriculum, was learning about faith stuff. And so the first kind of memorable moment that shaped me a little bit was when I was probably 7 or 8. I started going along to church and helping with faith formation stuff for the younger age group, my brother's age group. And I would go over and I'd just kind of be there. I'd help out, I'd run markers to classrooms or help them with their memory verses, just whether something little could be done, I would just help out there. And I did this pretty consistently. And so that kind of started, I think, where my love for serving or love for helping others, especially in the church, came from. Just because doing that from a young age and finding so much fulfillment in that, even if it was just little stuff.
Yeah.
But so I've been involved in our church for a long time, kind of behind the scenes, because you would bring me along. From that age until about, it would have been in 7th grade. But I basically just saw my faith as another thing to check off, school, basically. I'd go, I'd be good in class. My teachers always liked me. I'd know a lot of things because I was taught well. And then I'd go home, and then that was it's kind of homework. I don't know. I think a lot of people have similar experiences, but that's just how it was for me. It wasn't really personal. In fact, I remember there was one time when I was still pretty young that we were getting up to go to church, and I was like, you know what? I'm sick of this taking away my Sunday. I think it was 6. Sunday time, I don't want to go. I'm going to stand up. And I went over to one of you and was like, I don't want to go to church. It's boring. And I was like, yes, God. And then you're like, all right, we're still going. I was like, dang it. But it kind of shows I wasn't a huge fan necessarily all the time. But when I was in 7th grade, I went to Extreme Faith Camp for the first time, and that was the first camp I'd ever been to. It sounded fun. There was a lake, there was ropes course, there was a bunch of activities, friends, all that kind of thing. But the reason, I wasn't going because of the faith, I was going because of the extreme in the camp. At one point, I specifically remember thinking oh yeah, there's this fun stuff, and there's also 3 hours of adoration one night, but I suppose you gotta take the bad stuff with the good stuff. And so I went to camp. I wasn't expecting much. And I went through, and as soon as I got there, my first impression was wow, not only do these people, these kids my age, have extraordinary knowledge of the faith, but they also have the thing I was missing, which was enthusiasm. And they're really into it. They're really devout. So it was kind of a little bit of a culture shock for me, even though I'd grown up in the church my whole life. But went there, and they got to the big night of the adoration, they bring around the monstrance in front of everyone, and we're all just in the same room. There's confession going on in the back, all this stuff. And I don't remember much of that night specifically. All I remember is feeling God's love for the first time, really, really directly and undeniably in me. And it's after that, things were different. And it's not I had a huge moment of I was crying for 30 minutes, I didn't hear God's voice at that time. I didn't start laughing uncontrollably. None of the big stuff, but I saw those things happening around me, and littler moments too, and just seeing how people were affected when the Eucharist would pass by. And it's just you can't deny that. I didn't necessarily have doubts before, but it was more real then.
Yeah. God's presence in the Eucharist.
Yeah. So I started paying more attention at church. I remember there was a couple months afterwards where I was just my brother would whisper something, and I'd be stop it, pay attention. And but it only lasted a couple months, really. I'd say my starting level was here going into it, and then it went up to here, and it may have gone up and down since then, but it never got back down to here. So it was just, I wanted to read my Bible more after that. I was more into praying, but it only really lasted a couple months. And then I was kind of just back to normal, just with like a higher level of faith, I'd say. I wasn't putting in a ton of effort other than Mass, such as middle schoolers do. And then I went to camp again, had a little bit more, or the same, or like slightly more profound experience. Again, don't remember a ton of that, but I just remember it being impactful. And then I went to our high school mission trip, which was down to St. Louis, and it was just really great. I got to feel like God's presence again in that closeness, but I felt it through the community of that trip. There was about 50 of us on like a bus together traveling. We were gone like 9 days. And it was just like a really great feeling of close-knit Christian community where like you could go around and talk to anyone and have like a good conversation with them. And it's not like, those friendships didn't necessarily last very long afterwards, but some of them did. And it was just like, once I felt that feeling, I wanted to like keep striving for finding it again. Mission trip, I went on a couple more of those throughout high school and kind of got like a little bit more serious each time, or like a little bit deepened in my faith. And then kind of a rough patch hit when COVID started happening. Being homeschooled, it's not like it was as big of a change as it would be for other people. Like I was still at home all the time and stuff, but just hearing what was going on in the world around me and just like all other things kind of all like put together into a point, and I started to go into like more consistent and like intense depression, or kind of really felt that for the first time, which stuck with me for a couple of years. And after a little bit, it got to the point of like self-harm. Thankfully, it never got too bad, but I remember just one day I just went to confession, I think, before work, like something just very casual, like I'm gonna drive to go to confession before work. And when I confessed that, the priest was like, all right, you should tell your parents. And I was like, okay. And for some reason, I just felt like the strength and like conviction entered me from that. And so it was just like very easy. I like went to work, went home, said something, and then just like that. And I don't know like where that like urge or like how it was so easy for me to like just flip that switch and be like, okay, sure, why not? But definitely was a God moment in that. Like I know that for sure. It just kind of came from somewhere other than me. But after that, a little while afterwards, I ended up getting a therapist and going to therapy for like 6 months or so, which also helped me manage that depression. And kind of in the midst of all that, it was around my 18th birthday, maybe a little bit before that. So I started driving and I was like, oh, some cool things. And then my experiences at camp when I was at middle school popped into my head, and I was like, ooh, I should work at a camp. And so I went home and I like started looking up camps. And I quickly found out that all of like the Catholic camps that were relatively nearby were all staffed by like, they would train a bunch of people out and then they'd go like send them to a couple different places, and like it was holding like week-long camp rather than like staying at a location. So they hadn't anything at that time. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I can look at Christian camps too, nothing wrong with that. So I was looking and I found a couple, and I ended up finding a position called the activities team, which was basically like running the high ropes course, planning out and running games, doing laser tag, like other activities. And I was like, well, that seems more manageable than being a straight up like camp counselor for a summer, because I don't know if I could do that. But so I applied for that, got the position, and man, as soon as I arrived, it was like so clear that God was the one who put that on my heart. Like just like wanting to work at a camp, and all of it like led me exactly to the right place. Like as soon as I showed up, I had like no idea what to expect. I had never been to this place before. I had like two Zoom interviews with like people to get the position, and then once I was literally no basis for what was gonna happen. But like I showed up, connected with some people right away, the people on the activities team with me. I connected with one of my friends right away, and two of my closest friends stemmed from there that I still consider my absolute closest friends. And just that sense of Christian community was such close-knit between like the 30 of us that worked out there for the summer. And don't get me wrong, it was very like ups and downs. I was working on plenty of personal stuff, and so it was kind of all over the place, but it was so good just being able to like see God working in people like every day around me. the faith that everyone, like so many people had, and like the devotion to God, even though it might be in slightly a different way. But it was also great seeing that different perspective of like Christianity and like viewpoints that they had in like some of their practices, like how often they would like just go over and like pray over people, which I think is so beautiful, and us as Catholics should really do more often, because I don't think I really had any experience of it other than like that week at camp I had in middle school. Like, so different things like that was just really great to see. And not only did I get really good like lifelong friends out of it, I also got basically a big brother because I had always wanted like an older brother. Like all of my favorite characters were all like the mentor, like all the like mentor figures and stuff. And I found myself a real one. And he was very helpful in like just being something steady throughout the summer that I could just keep going back to and like talk through things with. So that was really, really good. And I just finished my second summer there, which was also amazing.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. So the experience that you had at camp, experiences really have helped you kind of springboard, I think, into a next level in your faith. Do you think it's the personal relationships with God that each of your co-camper people had? Do you think that kind of helped you think, a personal relationship is what I want?
Yeah, I think I'm just someone that has a hard time imagining something without experiencing it first. And so, or like seeing it in person. And being able to see like how people have like God at the forefront of their mind and like all their actions and things specifically has been like a huge inspiration for me. Just seeing like the joy, the energy, like the love for all of the campers that come through that people have has been a huge inspiration for me. And just being able to see all these wonderful people just makes me want to be better as well, or like want to be like that for other people. So
and so kind of where you really saw God working in your life is through camps early on, and through the Eucharist, through the relationships with people who went on similar outreach experiences with you, and then really saw him working through your coworkers at camp, and maybe in the campers as well.
Yeah.
And then you saw him just really be instrumental when you hit college as well.
Yeah. I think camp, I don't know if I was able to put a proper emphasis on it or like put it into words properly, but being at camp that first summer that I was at was the best possible thing that probably happened to me in my life, and ways of like turning my life around, or like not turning my life around, but like progressing me forward in things. I was able to like grow in like leadership, grow in compassion towards others, and like situational awareness, and like being able to adapt to that, and also just prayer and like good habits, and just to help me grow as a person so much, like coming back from that and being able to have like the most like solid and proper support from like friends that I had ever had, like the deepest connections with people, and people I still keep in touch with as of like yesterday. So
And so what would you recommend to, I don't know, younger people, who are maybe not feeling a personal relationship with God, or not feeling the faith, they're just kind of going through the motions or doing the basics. What would you recommend to them?
To start with, as someone who's gone through a lot of them, like, those like kind of cringe or like kind of boring like youth retreats that people try and get you to go on, where everyone's just like super hyped up and excited, and you're just like, take a leap, go out on those. Those are so helpful. Like the net ministries, people are like extreme faith camp, whatever camps you have around you. People are like trained for that. People are enthusiastic about that, and they're enthusiastic about you. Yeah. Like, even if you like don't want to go because of the faith things, and you're just going because of the fun, that's totally fine. Sometimes it takes steps. Sometimes you'll have just an amazing experience right off the bat. Whatever it is, you're always going to find like a listening ear there for whatever you want to talk about, because that's what they're there for, and that's what they're passionate about. as someone who's worked in that ministry before. So take a leap, go out to camp, go out to retreats. That's a good start. My other advice is just, God works differently in everyone's lives and like the way he speaks to people. So I know some people have heard God's voice like directly, and some people have had like miraculous healings. I've never necessarily like experienced that personally. All the times that I've known God has been working in my life, I maybe don't realize until afterwards, but it just comes with like this little like urge, like this little thought that maybe you came from nowhere, like you wouldn't have thought of normally, accompanied just by like a sense of peace. And it's not necessarily the biggest thing, but just those decisions that I've made that I know were God led just came with those. So that's the best way I could describe it.
Yeah.
So
Like a feeling and a nudge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you said yes, and that's kind of the key, right? So when you're getting those sort of nudges to grow closer to God, say yes.
Yeah, and like, what's the harm? What's the worst that's gonna happen? Like, if you're feeling like you should pray more, literally what bad can happen? Like, you're just gonna pray more, and then either it's boring and you don't like necessarily like it right away, but like again, what do
you got to lose?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming and sharing your story and how God worked in your life. And if you guys enjoyed watching this and you want to see more like this, go ahead and like and subscribe and leave us a comment. Tell us about your camp experiences or maybe your favorite camp to go to. Thanks for watching.